Good evening, and welcome to this 30th annual Henry L. Stimson Medal Ceremony. We're really thrilled to be here in person for the first time in 3 years because of COVID. My name is Mark Hellerer. I'm chair of the Stimson Medal Committee. I'm a recently retired partner at Pillsbury Winthrop Shaw Pittman and a former AUSA in the Southern District. Tonight is really a very special evening because it marks the 30th time that the City Bar Association has honored the men and women of the Southern and Eastern Districts for their outstanding dedication, their sacrifices, and their service, not only to the city, but to the nation as a whole. We do this by honoring two AUSAs, one from the Civil Division and one from the Criminal Division in each of the two districts. This is really to honor the commitment to public service, excellence, and integrity that was started by Henry Stimson back in 1906. First of all, it's my honor to introduce the speakers and the winners. On my left, we have Matthew Silverman from the Civil Division in the Eastern District, Alex Smith from the Criminal Division in the Eastern District, Jean David, or JD Barnaya from the Southern District of New York Civil Division, and Perry Carbone from the Criminal Division of the Southern District. And tonight, we're very pleased to have with us as our keynote speaker, the Honorable Robin Abrams, who is a U.S. District Court judge in the Southern District of New York. And it's Ronnie, not Robin. And in addition to that, we have Susan Kohlmann, who is the president of the City Bar Association. We welcome all our honored guests. We have Breon Peace from the Eastern District here, U.S. Attorney in the Eastern District. I think I see, is that you in the back? Yes. Well, John McEnany's here, and Audrey Strauss, the former acting U.S. Attorney in the Southern District of New York. Damian Williams, the U.S. Attorney in the Southern District, was not able to attend this evening, unfortunately. Let me provide a brief background on the medal itself. The medal was initiated by the City Bar Association back in 1992, and it honors the memory of Henry L. Stimson, who was the United States Attorney for the Southern District of New York from 1906 to 1909. He was appointed to the position by Teddy Roosevelt. Stimson later continued his distinguished career in public service, serving 3 presidents as Secretary of War, President Taft, President Roosevelt, and President Truman, and also represented President Hoover as Secretary of State. As Felix Frankfurter, one of Stimson's first assistants at the U.S. Attorney's, stated in his oral history, Stimson, quote, inherited an office of the United States Attorney, which by tradition up to that time was, with negligible exceptions, manned by hacks and mere job holders. To address the situation, Stimson radically changed the office and professionalized it. He asked the deans of leading law schools to recommend him promising candidates, and he tripled the staff by reducing the salaries to 1/3 of what the AUSAs had prior to that. And he counted on the rewards of public service to attract enthusiastic and able young lawyers. The standards of excellence and integrity on which he insisted remain the hallmark of both offices today, and it's that tradition we honor here tonight. The award was initiated back in 1992 by Ted Clark, a former president of the City Bar Association, an outstanding litigator at the Winthrop Stimson firm who had actually worked with Stimson during his career. Ted passed away several years ago, but is really kind of the heart of this award. The purpose of the award is to honor Stimson's memory and promote the principles that he initiated at the U.S. Attorney's Office. Those principles, which are the criteria for determining the award recipients, are outstanding contributions to the public service, absolute integrity, candor and fairness in dealing with adversaries and the court, highly developed professional skills, and personal courage and conviction. The medal itself was created specifically for this award. It's cast from a sculpture by Paul Manship, which is held at the Century Club. And it's supported by a contribution by Pillsbury Winthrop Shaw Pittman, the successor to the Stimson law firm. The Stimson committee members, in addition to me, are the president of the City Bar Association, Susan Kohlmann, the executive director of the City Bar Association, Brett Parker, the chair of the Federal Courts Committee, which is Harry Sandick from the Patterson-Belknap firm, also Stephen Weiner, a retired partner at the Pillsbury firm. And unfortunately, for the first time in 30 years, Steve won't be able to be with us tonight. He's having some health issues and will not be able to join us. And lastly, Carolina Fornos, a partner at the Pillsbury firm, who came down with COVID this morning, so she won't be here either. The selections are based on nominations from the U.S. Attorney offices, and believe me, it's always a very difficult task to choose the winner because all the nominees are really true stars in their own right with extraordinary accomplishments. Finally, before proceeding, let me take a moment to look back at the truly extraordinary accomplishments of some of the winners since they received the award. Many have continued their great work in the Southern and Eastern District offices in leadership positions. Others have taken positions of responsibility in law firms and public companies. Still others have gone on to other public service positions, and we'd like to go review some of those with you. Judge Richard Sullivan serves on the Second Circuit Court of Appeals. 3 winners, Kathy Seibel, Paul Gardefee, and Valerie Caproni, serve as judges in the Southern District. Sean Lane and David Jones serve as Southern District bankruptcy judges. James Cott serves as a magistrate judge in the Southern District, and Cheryl Pollack in the Eastern District. Brendan McGuire is now serving as chief counsel to Mayor Adams. Marshall Miller serves as the principal deputy attorney general in the Department of Justice. Margaret Garnett served as the commissioner of the New York State Department of Investigation until recently and has returned to the Southern District as the deputy U.S. attorney. 3 of our Stimson Medal winners, Alan Weingrad, Jim Comey, and David Kelly, went on to become U.S. attorney for the Eastern or Southern District. And a 4th, Richard Donahue, recently served as U.S. attorney in the Eastern District and then as principal deputy attorney general before becoming the acting attorney general at DOJ. And you likely saw Rich's testimony before the January 6th committee several months ago. Patrick Fitzgerald formerly served as the U.S. attorney in Chicago and was the DOJ special counsel in the Scooter Libby matter. Leslie Caldwell served as the assistant attorney general in charge of the criminal division and also the head of the Enron task force. Greg Andres, Jack Smith, Sung-Hee Soo, and David Bitkauer formerly held top spots in the criminal division at the Department of Justice. Andrew Goldsmith and Zainab Ahmad, along with Greg Andres, served as members of the Robert Mueller Special Counsel Investigation Team. And Greg Andres led the trial team in the Paul Manafort trial and conviction. Rob Kuzami served as the head of enforcement at the SEC and then as deputy U.S. attorney in the Southern District. Eric Korngold and Dieter Snell held leadership positions at the New York Attorney General's office. Elizabeth Glazer served as the director of the Mayor's Office of Criminal Affairs. Richard Weber served as chief of the IRS Criminal Division and as general counsel of the New York State Department of Financial Services. And as most of you know, one of our first honorees was James Comey, who served as director of the FBI and deputy attorney general. So as you can see, our winners tonight enter a highly select group of dedicated public officials. With that, I'd like to introduce our speaker tonight, which is the Honorable Ronnie Abrams. It's my distinct pleasure to introduce her. Judge Abrams received her BA from Cornell University in 1990 and her law degree from Yale in 1993. Upon graduation, she served as the law clerk to the Honorable Thomas P. Grisey in the Southern District, and then worked as a litigation associate at Davis Polk from 1994 to 1998. In 1998, she became a Assistant U.S. attorney in the Southern District, where she served for 10 years. and she held positions as chief of the General Crimes Unit and as deputy chief of the Criminal Division. During her tenure there, she received a number of awards, including the Department of Justice Award for Superior Performance. The latter award was in recognition of her work on a number of cases leading to convictions of members of a Colombian gang wanted for the murder of an NYPD detective and approximately 100 armed robberies, and for the convictions of the leadership of the United Blood Nation, commonly known as the Bloods. And by the way, she has very strong ties with the Eastern District through her husband, Greg Andres, who's had a distinguished career in that office and is in fact a former Stimson Medal winner himself. Upon leaving the U.S. Attorney's Office, she returned to Davis Polk, where she held the position of Special Counsel for Pro Bono, and she also taught as an adjunct professor at Columbia Law School. In 2011, she was nominated to the district bench by President Obama and took her position in 2012, where she has served for the past 10 years. In addition to her regular judicial duties, in 2015, Judge Abrams created and began to run the Young Adult Opportunity Program, a judicially supervised pretrial program for nonviolent young adults charged in the Southern District. The program provides young adult defendants with access to employment, counseling, and treatment resources. Program participants, if they are successful, may receive a shorter sentence or even a reduction, deferral, or dismissal of the charges against them. Judge Abrams has also been involved in other criminal justice reform efforts, including the creation of reentry courts in the Southern District. She has a distinguished career and record in pro bono work. She has served as counsel to the New York State Justice Task Force, addressing wrongful convictions in the state, and she received the New York State Bar Association Pro Bono Services Award for her work on that task force. She has also been very active in the City Bar, having served on the City Bar Council for the Profession, the City Bar Pro Bono and Legal Services Committee, and the Government Ethics Committee. In light of her remarkable record of public service commitment, Judge Abrams is an exceedingly well qualified to speak to us this evening. Please welcome Judge Abrams.
Thank you, Mark. Welcome, everyone. I'm so honored to be here this evening to recognize the outstanding achievements of the recipients of the Stimson Medal, Alex Smith, Matthew Silverman, JD Barnaya, and Perry Carbone. Congratulations to all of you. I feel like I should start with a confession. I have a little bit of Stimson Medal envy. You see, I never received the Stimson Medal during my time as an AUSA in the Southern District. A number of my former supervisors in the office, Rich Sullivan, Celeste Kuhlefeld, Dave Kelly, received it. Some of my former supervisees in the office, Anjan Sani, Brendan McGuire, Margaret Garnett received it. My husband, as you heard, Greg Andres, was awarded the medal. And I'm just going to stop there for a minute and just make very clear that he falls into the spouse category and not the supervisee category. So Rich, if you talk to him, just tell him I made that very clear. In any event, not surprisingly, I've had friends and peers get the award, not limited to Joan Loughnane, David Raskin, Carl Metzner from Southern, Marshall Miller, and Jack Smith from Eastern. And even tonight, Perry Carbone is someone I interviewed to be an AUSA, and I like to think I helped hire him. I won't say I was in any way responsible for many of these good successes, but for some reason that line about how much good you can do if you don't care who gets the credit just keeps ringing in my head. Seriously though, to the extent I have any envy at all, it is not just because this is so distinguished an award, but because you folks, all of you folks here in the U.S. Attorney's offices for the Southern and Eastern Districts of New York have an extraordinary job. For me, and I imagine for many of you, being an AUSA was the only job I ever really wanted, and I wanted it desperately. The opportunity to serve the public, to do the right thing, to stand up in court and say that you represent the United States of America is a job like no other, and all of us who've had that opportunity are privileged indeed. But as many of you say, and rightly note in your summations, with privilege comes responsibility. I thought you'd chime in there, but you didn't. The judges you appear before expect you to live up to the highest obligations of your offices. The public depends on you to enforce the laws of the United States with zealousness and with compassion. and justice requires you to uphold the law without fear or favor. Those demands, which are equal part honor and obligation, are the result of generations of principled work by generations of honorable AUSAs. There was a saying that I often heard in the office about how we all stood on the shoulders of those who came before us. It was always clear to me that we were the beneficiaries of the goodwill that had been built up over years due to the hard work and professionalism of our predecessors. But standing on our predecessors' shoulders also means, I think, that you must be on a constant journey to further improve upon the existing excellence of your offices. Henry Stimson, the U.S. Attorney for whom this award is dedicated, is of course one of those predecessors. It was Stimson, as you heard from Mark, who in 1906 professionalized the office and set a tradition of ethical standards and commitment to public service that exists to this day. Prior to Stimson's appointment, Assistant U.S. Attorneys awarded themselves a substantial portion of recoveries of the office's cases, earning huge fees and splitting them with friends who volunteered to take on cases. This actually made me think of former Stimson Award winner Sharon Cohn-Levin, and I thought if she was running the forfeiture unit back then, she would own an island. But Stimson, by contrast, took a fixed salary that was a fraction of what he had made in private practice. He committed to not taking private cases during his tenure, and he hired an ambitious and talented team of young litigators who were willing to work at significant salary cuts to serve the public interest. He created the model for the two offices that are honored today. Reading about Stimson and the way in which he transformed the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York left me thinking about how both your offices have advanced since his tenure. Whereas Stimson hired almost exclusively men, and specifically only white men, in 1921, James C. Thomas, the first black lawyer, was hired in the Southern District. Although Stimson did hire the first female lawyer in the DOJ in 1906, Mary Grace Quackenboss, as a special assistant district attorney, she only lasted a year, and it wasn't until 1921 that Mary Rudder Towell was appointed as the first female AUSA in the Southern District. Bob Fisk, who I am so proud to have as my mentor and my friend, hired and promoted many women when he was U.S. Attorney for the Southern District, increasing the number of women in that office from 8 to 38, making it basically a 50-50 split with men. Among those women are many of the lions, or lionesses, whatever the plural is, of the bar, including former U.S. Attorney Mary Jo White, Judges Denise Coate, Deborah Batts, Barbara Jones, Naomi Buchwald, and many more. Under Fisk, Buchwald became the first chief of the Civil Division. Both offices continue to select only the most qualified of lawyers, but are thankfully continuing and committed to becoming more diverse every day. In that respect, I would be remiss not to mention former Stimson Award winner Neil Corwin, who I know has spent years devoted to rethinking hiring practices in the Southern District. And Bill Mueller was legendary in the Eastern District for shepherding through extraordinary candidates, some of whom reached the highest ranks of the Department of Justice, including former U.S. Attorney and U.S. Attorney General Loretta Lynch. Judy Phillips now carries on that work admirably. Since Stimson's time, some of the most important cases in the country have been brought in the Southern and Eastern Districts of New York. Stimson himself won historic convictions against some of the largest trusts of his day and helped enforce the notion that government could act on behalf of the public against powerful interests. Your offices have since built upon that tradition, bringing and winning convictions in terrorism cases involving the World Trade Center bombings, the Times Square bomber, the planned suicide bombings of the New York subways, the plot to attack JFK Airport, successfully prosecuting major cases that helped hold responsible or even dismantle violent gangs, mafia families, and the Medellin cartel, winning convictions for insider trading, mortgage and tax fraud, bringing civil actions enforcing the Clean Air and Clean Water Act, as well as our federal anti-discrimination laws, and obtaining multi-billion-dollar settlements against financial institutions, the New York City Housing Authority, and countless others. While there are far too many more cases to recount here, there is no doubt that so many were groundbreaking and enormously impactful. But today we look at justice not simply in terms of successful prosecutions. In this respect, both offices are continuing to evolve in their thinking of what it means to be just, to be fairer, to be more equitable every day. Both the EDNY and SDNY U.S. Attorney's offices participate in reentry courts and pretrial programs designed to reduce recidivism by assisting and improving the lives of individuals in the criminal justice system. The Young Adult Opportunity Program, which was just mentioned, that I run, which Judge Knepper and I created 7 years ago after visiting the POP and SOS courts in the Eastern District, is an intensive pretrial diversion program for young adults in which we assist participants in setting and reaching their goals, from getting a job, a GED, to a master's degree, obtaining child care, housing, staying drug-free. Working with us as a critical partner, the U.S. Attorney's Office has already nollied or otherwise dismissed the charges of close to 40 individuals, in addition to reducing the charges of others. The most recent dismissal, just last week, was of a charge against a young man who is a Lance Corporal in the U.S. Marine Corps Reserve. He runs a funeral home while studying for the LSAT. Last summer, he was an intern in the Sonia and Selena Sotomayor Judicial Internship Program, and he now has a second chance in life. Now that is justice. Former Stimson Award winners Joan Loughnane and Janice Eckenberg have been two of the U.S. Attorney's Office's point people on that program. Given the times we're living in, it's also important to recognize that the Southern and Eastern Districts of New York have a long and storied history of asserting their political independence. Stimson himself helped establish that tradition. As U.S. Attorney, he ignored suggestions from the White House about how to direct his prosecutions into the powerful New York sugar trusts. And at various times, he refused requests by members of the president's party to appoint assistant U.S. attorneys to garner political favor. You all are serving in a time of growing mistrust of our foundational institutions and an attempt by some to undermine the integrity and core mission of those institutions. So let me say what shouldn't have to be said. Don't ever forget that you took an oath to defend the Constitution. Be true to the rule of law and your obligation to uphold it. Former Stimson Award winner Rich Donahue is but one example of someone who recently did just that. In an era of increasing polarization and questions about the role of law and law enforcement in a just society, rarely has it been so important to preserve the missions and the reputations of your esteemed offices through courage and independence and by wielding your awesome power only with the utmost integrity. Thankfully, you have strong shoulders to stand on. I think of Mary Jo White's investigation into the late-term pardons of President Clinton, the president who appointed her. And during Preet Bharara's term, the prosecution of top New York State Democratic elected officials. And under Rob Capers, the investigation into Democratic Suffolk County Police Chief James Burke, among many other examples of the offices showing they could follow the facts and the law regardless of politics. In Stimson's words, if I should once permit such political considerations to interfere with the administration of justice in this office, where could I stop? If I should once begin to allow my official conduct to be swayed by considerations such as those, I feel it would end by eventually leading me wholly astray. I want to close by recognizing colleagues, loved ones, and those you serve. First, colleagues. It's particularly meaningful for me to be a part of this award ceremony because it honors both the Southern and Eastern Districts of New York. I know that some of you may sometimes see the AUSAs in your sister offices as rivals. For me, having a husband who spent over a decade in the Eastern District, it's kind of more like in-laws, you know? Sometimes it's a little bit awkward, but deep down what you really feel is admiration and affection. At the end of the day, I hope you all remember that those folks across the bridge are Department of Justice colleagues more than anything else, doing the same job with the same mission and under the same pressures you are. Second, family. We are here today not just to celebrate the Stimson Medal winners, but to recognize their families. As a former AUSA and spouse of one, I recognize the important demands the job places, not just on assistants, but those closest to them. I want to extend sincere thanks to all of the family members of today's winners and the family members of all the AUSAs who share the burdens of the office without fully enjoying its rewards. And finally, to the communities and victims whose rights you vindicate. One of the moments that stands out most for me, and Mark mentioned this was one of the cases that I tried, from my time in the office involved the investigation and prosecution of a violent gang that, as noted, committed about 100 armed robberies and numerous murders, including the murder of a former New York City police detective, Donald Pagani. Every day for 2 months, Pagani's widow came to court to watch the trial of gang leader Alex Restrepo, who had shot and killed her husband. After the guilty verdict was delivered, she approached me and my trial partners, saying only, "Justice was done." That, to me, was the meaning and measure of my work. It is your work as well. So congratulations again to this year's winners. May you all be the shoulders upon which your successors stand.
Thank you very much, Judge. Next, it's my great pleasure to introduce my dear friend Susan Kohlmann, who became the president of the City Bar Association several months ago. Susan is a graduate of Yale University and Columbia University Law School, and she is currently a partner at Jenner & Block, where until recently she was the managing partner of its New York offices. But that's not all. She's an active intellectual property litigator and a trial lawyer, and serves as co-chair of Jenner's trademark, advertising, and unfair competition practice. Not only that, she's also a member of Jenner & Block's policy committee, chair of the firm's diversity committee, and she also serves on the New York office's pro bono committee. She also has an incredible record of pro bono work. Currently, she's not only the City Bar president, but she also simultaneously serves as chair of the board of directors of the New York Lawyers for the Public Interest. Previously, she also served as a board member and as chair of the Legal Services NYC. Additionally, she has a long history of involvement with the City Bar, having served on the nominating and executive committees and as chair of the Committee to Enhance Diversity. Given her extraordinary record as a trial lawyer, law firm administrator, and pro bono officer, it's no wonder that she has been named a finalist this year for the New York Law Journal's Attorney of the Year. The wonder is how she finds the time and energy to excel at all these activities. Please welcome Susan.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mark. It is really a delight and honor to be here, and thank you so much, Judge Abrams, for those really wonderful remarks. Really, our gratitude goes to Mark Hellerer, the heart behind the Stimson Medal Committee, the committee itself, and Pillsbury Winthrop Shaw Pittman, Henry Stimson's legacy firm, for this really important and joyful annual celebration that we have of the important work of the Southern District U.S. attorneys and their stars. I am particularly thrilled to be the person who gets to do the fun part, give out these awards, because from the list that Mark read and the people that Judge Abrams mentioned, these awards are not given lightly. These people are amazing, and the shoulders they stand on, and the people who are going to stand on your shoulders, I have no doubt, are going to be amazing, and we really can't wait to see what you all do. Like all attorneys, and I think the judge mentioned this, you took an oath, solemnly swearing to support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of New York, and that you would faithfully discharge the duties of your office according to the best of your ability. Well, obviously, you're being honored here today because you've faithfully discharged the duties of the office to the best of your ability. There's just no question of that. But I have no doubt that you are also here because supporting the Constitution holds significant meaning for you. Discharging one's duties in support of the Constitution is to support the rule of law when it is being challenged. Following the facts and the law, seeking the truth, acting in good faith, doing the right thing, seeking justice and not just wins, recognizing that no one is above the law. All of these words And all of these phrases are sadly imbued with very new meaning these days. And they connote qualities that go well beyond skillful lawyering and, regardless of one's politics, that comprise character and leadership that are equally recognized in this award. They were present in the prior recipients of this award that we heard about, and I know they are present in all of you by virtue of this award that you're about to receive today. We appreciate and need you more than ever. And with that, it is my great honor to present these awards. So I am going to spend a little time describing each person because their accomplishments are truly amazing. And I am going to start with Matthew Silverman from the Eastern District of New York and its Civil Division. Matt received his JD, magna cum laude, in 2003 from Indiana University Law School, after receiving his BA, summa cum laude, in 2000 from the State University of New York at Oswego. After law school, he served as Presidential Management Fellow at the Federal Emergency Management Agency and simultaneously as a Special Assistant U.S. Attorney in the Eastern District of Virginia. Matthew later served as an Assistant Attorney General in the New York State Attorney General's office for over 4 years, where he litigated mental health, administrative law, civil rights, and employment discrimination cases. Following that position, from 2011 to 2013, Matt litigated Individuals with Disabilities Education Act cases for the New York City Department of Education. He then became an AUSA in the Eastern District of New York in May of 2013. Matt has served as Chief of the environmental litigation in the Civil Division since 2018. He oversees all federal government environmental litigation within the Eastern District. He also leads the office's recently created Environmental Justice Team, which focuses on protecting the district's most vulnerable residents from disproportionate environmental hazards. Matt's critically important work with the Civil Division's Environmental Justice and Enforcement Initiative serves as a model for U.S. attorneys' offices across the country. With respect to environmental litigation, in his capacity as Chief of Environmental Litigation, Matt works closely with the Department of Justice Environmental and Natural Resources Division, other U.S. attorneys' offices, state and local officials, along with key federal client agencies such as the EPA and nearly every branch of the United States Armed Forces. Early on, Matt achieved success in United States versus State of New York et al., which involved New York State's operation of 54 illegal cesspools. The illicit large-capacity cesspools, which violated the Safe Drinking Water Act regulations, were primarily located in state parks in Suffolk County, where nitrogen and other nutrient pollution pose significant water quality problems. Matt resolved the matter through a consent judgment that required New York State and its agencies to close the illegal cesspools at a cost of about $8.8 million. Upon being appointed Chief of Environmental Litigation in May of 2018, Matt assumed responsibility for the investigation of some of the most significant surplus sites in the nation, implicating billions of dollars in cleanup costs, including the Gowanus Canal in Brooklyn, Hicksville, Newcastle groundwater contamination site in Nassau County, and the Navy Weapons Industrial Reserve Plant in Bethpage, New York. Through Matt's sound judgment and management, these matters have been favorably resolved or otherwise substantially advanced. And in 2021, Matt resolved a Clean Air Act enforcement action between the New York City Department of Education for failing to comply with regulations that required tune-ups and energy assessments of oil-fired boilers at over 560 schools with over 1,350 regulated boilers. Notably, many of New York City's DOE's boilers are located in disadvantaged communities whose residents are exposed to disproportionately high pollution levels that result in adverse health and environmental impacts. After thoroughly investigating and building a case for litigation, Matt negotiated a consent judgment that required the NYC DOE to reduce its boilers' emissions by transitioning 7 of its large oil-fired boilers to cleaner natural gas boilers by 2023 at an approximate cost of $50 million, pay a civil penalty of $1 million, and conduct regular tune-ups to monitor and repair its boilers as required by the CAA to control excess emissions. Matt has also supervised approximately a dozen other significant environmental case filings and settlements, and he has participated substantially in the development and resolution of those cases. Importantly, Matt's work has broken new ground in DOJ's emphasis on environmental justice. In 2021, to give force and effect to the Presidential Executive Order 14008, Matt helped develop and launch the office's Environmental Justice Team. The team, the first of its kind among U.S. attorneys' offices, prioritizes the enforcement of environmental laws in communities that have been subject to disproportionate environmental pollution and hazards. In December 2021, the team sponsored the office's first Environmental Justice Forum, an all-day training event that featured over 300 participants from 15 federal agencies. But that's not all. On healthcare fraud, Matt has also expertly handled a number of healthcare fraud matters, most notably several cases filed under the QI provisions of the False Claims Act against AmerisourceBergen Corporation. And over several years of intense investigation, Matt and his colleagues determined that that corporation's affiliate had illegally repackaged millions of doses of supportive cancer drugs without FDA approval, putting patients at risk of infection or ineffective treatment. Matt's exhaustive investigative efforts culminated in an exceptional 2018 False Claims Act settlement with ABC and related entities in which defendants paid $625 million, which constituted the government's largest single recovery under the False Claims Act that year. And in addition to the civil penalty, ABC pled guilty and paid a $260 million criminal fine and restitution, bringing the government's total recovery to $885 million. And apart from his affirmative work and defensive environmental cases, Matt has also litigated numerous difficult defensive actions during his time in the office, obtaining favorable results through dispositive motion practice, at trial, and on appeal. In sum, Matt has consistently shown outstanding professionalism, intellectual rigor, and sound judgment in promoting the interests of justice in some of the office's most challenging affirmative and defensive cases. Matt is a most deserving recipient of the Henry L. Stimson Award, and I hope you will join me in honoring Matt as he comes to the stage.
Good evening. I'd first like to thank the New York City Bar Association, President Susan Kohlmann, for this event, the Stimson Committee, Mark Hellerer for selecting me for this honor, and Judge Abrams for her inspiring remarks. Thank you to our U.S. Attorney, Breon Peace, First Assistant U.S. Attorney, Carolyn Picorni, Executive Assistant U.S. Attorney, Judy Phillips, Counsel to the U.S. Attorney, Susan Riley, Civil Division Chief, Joseph Maratullo. Congratulations to my fellow honorees. I'm so pleased to be here with you tonight. I'm humbled and honored to receive this award. When I learned that I had been nominated I looked at the website and read a little bit about the award, and then I saw the list of people before me who achieved this great honor. And frankly, just couldn't believe that I would be part of such a group, as I recognized the names of my former colleagues, my mentors, distinguished judges and high-level officials, and leaders in private practice. Being in AUSA and coming to this point in my career has been quite a journey. It wasn't something that I set out to do, quite frankly. Coming out of law school, I was rather political, idealistic. I wanted to do public service, but didn't really know what I wanted to do. I worked at FEMA, as was mentioned, was a special assistant U.S. attorney part-time. My first real legal job was as a public defender in Nassau County. The job, quite frankly, was scary. It seemed like I was asked to do things that were impossible. I interviewed 24 defendants in a morning and arraigned them all that day. I would meet with dozens of people, at one time, essentially. I did this to the best of my novice ability, fighting for their rights, for them to be released or have reasonable bail. After that, I worked at the State Attorney General's office, where I represented mental health agencies in various types of litigation, including in numerous civil commitment hearings, while also handling many other types of cases, including a multi-week disability rights trial that was held in the Eastern District. It was those challenging cases and experiences, the colleagues that I worked with on those cases, and being in the courtroom on a daily basis, which gave me the abilities and confidence to apply for and become an AUSA. I was going to thank my colleagues from the office at the end of my remarks, but it occurred to me that they're the ones who helped position me for the case opportunities that were discussed by Susan, which were critical to my time in the office. I want to thank my deputy chiefs, Gail Matthews, Artemis Lakakis, and now Richard Hayes, who've been central to my accomplishments and have steered me towards opportunities and cases I may not have sought out on my own. Also, my civil chiefs, Susan Riley, Joseph Maratolo, who have always strongly supported my work as well as the environmental practice. I'd also like to thank my mentor, Senior Counsel Deborah Ronnie, for her sage guidance and leadership, including on the Amerisource Bergen case and in environmental matters. Sandra Levy, my predecessor as environmental chief, who strengthened the practice over many years. I'd also thank my paralegals, my legal assistants, and all of my colleagues who've supported me over the last 9 years. Representing the United States has been a great privilege, but not without its challenges. When I started as an AUSA, I had a diverse and heavy caseload, primarily of defensive matters. Truth be told, it was a bit overwhelming with the scope of subject matter areas and the intensity of the practice. However, as a fairly green AUSA, I was given the opportunity to work on a major case, the Amerisource Bergen investigation, which involved the unsafe repackaging of millions of doses of supportive cancer drugs by one of the largest pharmaceutical distributors. The company's unapproved products, which were produced under insanitary conditions, were distributed nationwide to vulnerable cancer patients. Some of them were contaminated with bacteria and unknown particles, which defendants' employees simply called floaters. In advancing this scheme for profits, defendants caused oncology practices to illegally bill federal payers for these unsafe products. The case culminated in a civil False Claims Act settlement of $625 million and a criminal plea, which was negotiated by my fellow honoree, Alex Smith. My part in developing this complex case required not just all of the skills I had developed throughout my career, but also the critical assistance of many AUSA colleagues, support staff, auditors, and agents. Since 2018, I've had the privilege of leading the Civil Division's longstanding environmental practice, which initiates enforcement actions and also defends federal agencies at some of the largest and most complex hazardous waste sites in the nation. The remedies we achieve, both on the affirmative and defensive side, protect our drinking water, our oceans, our land, our housing, and our air. Most recently, under the leadership of U.S. Attorney Breon Peace and former U.S. Attorney Jacqueline Kasoulis, and to advance the President's executive order on environmental justice, we launched an innovative environmental justice team consisting of numerous AUSAs and paralegals, which works closely with federal agencies and experts to prioritize our enforcement efforts and ultimately obtain environmental benefits for communities that have historically been subject to disproportionate environmental burdens. Notably, the team sponsored the office's first Environmental Justice Forum, inviting federal agencies throughout the federal government for training and discussion of the new priorities. Several of our recent cases have been critical to advancing environmental justice. The New York City Department of Education Clean Air Act consent judgment, which requires the city to properly tune and maintain boilers throughout the school system as it transitions from dirtier burning fuels, such as oil, to cleaner burning fuels like natural gas and other technologies. In that settlement, we achieved over $50 million in mitigation projects to prioritize that transition in environmental justice communities, to provide for cleaner air, less particulate matter, and other hazardous air pollutants. The environmental justice team is working on other significant matters to protect the public health and environment, including lead paint enforcement. We have also conducted community outreach, something that we rarely did before, to make sure that the public is aware of the team and the types of matters we could work on. Those community contacts have been both rewarding and well received. One contact left an impression on me. A community group leader we spoke with asked, "Why is DOJ contacting us now for the first time after 150 years of silence?" Our answer was simply that we're here to listen, to inquire, and to help where we can, and to connect them to the agencies in their government that can address environmental justice concerns in their community, such as an abundance of coastal hazardous waste sites and the attendant risks of climate change. Finally, I want to thank my family, first my wife Rachel, who's here tonight, my son Adam, who's not, especially who supported me throughout these years, especially during recent years of working at home and taking video conferences in all random places in the house. I want to thank my mom and dad, Laura and Ronald Silverman, who are also here for their support in developing my interest in social justice. I also thank my big brother, Carrie, also an attorney, for showing me the way through law school and guiding me in my career. I could not have accomplished what I have without my family, my friends, my colleagues, and I thank you all.
Thank you so much, Matt. So now it gives me special pleasure to introduce the next award winner, Alex Smith, because I had the great pleasure of practicing with Alex at Jenner & Block before she joined the office. But let me tell you about Alex's accomplishments. Alex received her BA, magna cum laude, from Harvard College in 2002 and graduated cum laude from Harvard Law School in 2005. She then worked as a litigation associate at Cravath, Swaine & Moore and at Jenner & Block, and completed clerkships with the Honorable Faith Hochberg, United States District Court for the District of New Jersey, and the Honorable Julio Fuentes, United States Court of Appeals for the Third Circuit. Alex joined the office in July of 2012. And during her time in the office, Alex has an outstanding record of achievement in a variety of important criminal cases. She has also held several important supervisory roles in the office, including deputy chief and then chief of the Business and Securities Fraud section, and more recently as deputy chief of the Criminal Division from December 2021 to the present. In a widely publicized securities fraud case, Alex led the investigation and prosecution in United States versus Martin Shkreli and Evan Griebel, which culminated in 2 successful trials spanning a total of 17 weeks between June and December 2017 and resulted in the convictions of both defendants. The case began with an 18-month investigation into 4 complex multi-year, interrelated fraud schemes that caused over $20 million in losses to individual investors and a NASDAQ-listed public company that were planned, executed, and concealed by pharmaceutical executive Martin Shkreli and his attorney, Evan Greipel. After indictment, the defendants sought and were granted a severance based on Shkreli's assertion of an advice of counsel defense and Greipel's assertion that Shkreli lied to him about the frauds. At each trial, Alex and the team tackled the challenge of explaining to a jury the defendants' roles in and culpability for the 4 very sophisticated fraud schemes in a clear, cogent manner. This challenge was further complicated by the fact that each defendant placed the blame entirely on the other absent defendant. Alex was instrumental to the team's trial successes. She was the only prosecutor to be involved in the case from the inception of the investigation to its conclusion and to serve on both trial teams. Most significantly, she crafted and delivered the government's summation at each trial. After the trials, Alex and the team successfully investigated and then secured Shkreli's remand to prison after he made multiple threats to individuals wholly unrelated to his crimes. She also handled the appeals by both defendants, drafting the briefs and handling both arguments before the Second Circuit, which ultimately affirmed the defendants' convictions. Alex has also worked on several highly significant cases in which individuals and entities were charged with violations of the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. In these cases, Alex worked in conjunction with the FCPA unit of the Department of Justice Fraud Section, serving as the lead AUSA in the office. In these cases, Alex also coordinated with domestic and foreign law enforcement and regulatory entities. First, in a series of cases, Alex led the EDNY team in the investigation of 2 Brazilian-based pharmaceutical companies, Odebrecht and its subsidiary Braskem, a publicly traded company in the United States, for their roles in a massive bribery and money laundering scheme. The investigation revealed that between 2000 and 2016, Odebrecht and Braskem paid close to $1 billion in bribes to government officials, their representatives, and political parties in Brazil and 11 other countries in order to win business. Alex and the team worked tirelessly on a relatively short time frame to bring criminal cases against the 2 corporate entities by analyzing and synthesizing a massive amount of information, much of it gathered from foreign countries. Ultimately, Odebrecht and Braskem each pled guilty to a violation of the FCPA and agreed to pay a combined penalty of $3.2 billion to resolve charges in the United States, Brazil, and Switzerland. Following the resolution of the corporate cases, Alex led the investigation and prosecution of a number of individuals involved in the scheme, including company executives, public officials, and intermediaries. In another set of cases, Alex was a part of the team that prosecuted investment bank Goldman Sachs and 3 individuals, Goldman Sachs executives Roger Ng and Tim Leissner, and Malaysian businessman Joe Low, for their participation in a multi-billion dollar money laundering and bribery conspiracy related to One Malaysia Development Berhad, Malaysia's investment development fund. Goldman Sachs, Ng, Leissner, and Low, and others conspired to pay over $1 billion in bribes to at least a dozen high-ranking government officials in Malaysia and Abu Dhabi to obtain lucrative business for Goldman Sachs. As a result of the exhaustive investigation conducted by Alex and the team, Goldman Sachs entered into a 3-year deferred prosecution agreement, and its Malaysian subsidiary pled guilty to conspiracy to violate the anti-bribery provisions of the FCPA, admitting to paying over $1.6 billion in bribes to high-ranking Malaysian and Abu Dhabi officials. Goldman Sachs also paid $2.9 billion in criminal penalties as part of a global resolution with 8 different foreign and domestic authorities, the largest number of authorities to ever coordinate on a corporate resolution, including the United States, the United Kingdom, Singapore, Malaysia, and Hong Kong. With respect to the individual defendants, Leisner pled guilty pursuant to a cooperation agreement. Lowe remains a fugitive, and in April 2022, after a hard-fought trial that lasted 9 weeks, Eng was convicted on all counts. At trial, Alex took responsibility for presenting the complex financial tracing at the heart of the case, developing the financial charts and models that painstakingly untangled for the jury a complex web of illegal, opaque transactions in 12 countries. Alex also cross-examined the defense's key witnesses, including the defendant's wife, and corralled all the trial evidence into a powerful and persuasive summation. Alex has also led successful prosecutions in several significant healthcare fraud and violent crime cases. Moreover, since 2019, in her spare time, Alex has co-taught the EDNY Federal Prosecution Clinic at NYU Law School. And additionally, in 2020, Alex working with an AUSA from the Southern District of New York and agents from the FBI, she helped to develop a 2-hour training on Brady and Giglio obligations that the team then presented in a series of presentations to more than 1,400 FBI agents, analysts, and other personnel in the FBI's New York office. That training was subsequently used to train employees at several other agencies in New York. Alex's outstanding achievements and unwavering commitment to public service represent the finest traditions of the office. We are delighted and pleased to present Alex with her Stimson Medal.
Thank you. I want to start by thanking you, Mark, the Stimson Committee, and the City Bar for this tremendous honor, Judge Abrams for her wise and inspiring remarks, and Susan. I was lucky enough to be in Jenner's New York office when Susan was the head of the office, and I have no doubt that you're leading the City Bar with the same energy, enthusiasm, and warmth. I also want to congratulate my fellow Stimson winners, especially Matt, who I worked closely with for several years on the ABC matter. He is an excellent prosecutor and, more importantly, a wonderful person. To the extent I have something to convey beyond thank you for this award, I will say that my experience over the past 10 years has taught me 2 things. Those 2 things, being a prosecutor and being a good person, are inextricably linked. I have the pleasure, as Susan mentioned, of co-teaching the ED&Y prosecution externship at the NYU Law School. The students intern in our office and then take a seminar on the role of the federal prosecutor. At the outset of every semester, we discuss Robert Jackson's classic 1940 speech. As I'm sure those in this room know, the speech was delivered when Jackson was the Attorney General, and it discusses the incredible power wielded by federal prosecutors and the related responsibilities that come with that power, including to exercise it with thought, humility, and only where warranted. Every time I reread it, I am struck both by how prescient it was then and how timely it is now. Jackson emphasized that federal prosecutors have a responsibility not just to win cases, but to do justice, tempering, as he said, zeal with human kindness. He talked about how we must dedicate ourselves to the spirit of fair play and decency, and how it is essential to be impartial when making decisions about who to prosecute, steering clear of both political entanglements and personal biases. What I take away from Jackson's speech, and indeed what I take away from my time at the ED&Y, is something obvious but sometimes overlooked: that our criminal justice system is made up of human actors with human flaws, and it can only be as good as we are. Jackson was appealing to the better angels of our nature because he knew that most of the really hard, really consequential decisions we have to make as prosecutors about how to allocate our limited resources, which defendants to charge with which crimes, and how to resolve cases are not decisions that can be legislated or that rules can be written down for. Ultimately, we are guided in large part by our judgment and the judgment of our supervisors and our colleagues. Given my now senior status in the office, I think a lot about how to develop good judgment in junior prosecutors, about how to recognize the difference between can and should, between what the law authorizes and what justice calls for. Good judgment is not necessarily instinctive, but it seems to me that it can be developed and enhanced like a muscle. It starts with hiring smart, thoughtful, humble people with a diversity of backgrounds and viewpoints, and raising them up in a culture where people are taught to sit with the weight of tough decisions before making them. It's about making mistakes and learning from them. And it's about learning to trust one's sense of right and wrong, putting aside what might make the headlines and not defaulting to what might be the easiest path. To that end, my most important accomplishments in the office to me are not what makes it into a biography in a CLE program, but the things that are less tangible, the ways in which I can try and pass on what I have learned from others and to help develop and also learn from the next generation of prosecutors. A particularly important task right now, given that we have a whopping 22 general crimesters in the office. That work includes work on the office's hiring and diversity committees, in developing robust mentoring and training programs, as a supervisor in a second seat, in teaching students that one day might become prosecutors, and as a trial partner and a friend. It's the personal connections and relationships that matter, which have become even more important in the last few difficult years. And making sure, as Jackson touched on, we are alert to and work to counteract our human weaknesses without losing our humanity. So having said something about what I think makes for a great prosecutor, let me say if I am even remotely such a prosecutor, it is because others made me one. This is the part of the speech where I get to thank everyone who has mentored, encouraged, and supported me, both before I got to the office and when I've been here, and who have made me, at least professionally, who I am. First, I want to thank all of my mentors who encouraged me to pursue a career in public service, including Judge Fuentes, and all of those AUSAs whose excellence and dedication to and love of the job inspired me to choose to serve in this way. Judge Hochberg, my co-clerk Jessica Ortiz, and the many former AUSAs I worked with at Jenner, including Richard Ziegler. And I want to especially thank Katja Justin and Andrew Weissman, both ED&Y alums from whom I learned so much and who have continually offered guidance and wisdom. And I was lucky enough to work with Andrew when he came back to the Department of Justice as well. The second group of people I want to thank are my ED&Y colleagues who have become like my family. I cannot possibly thank them all, but as a quick list, I want to start with all 9 United States attorneys that I've served under, from Loretta Lynch, who made me the happiest person in the world when she hired me, all the way through to Breon Peace, who has truly been a champion for all of those intangible and yet essential efforts that help develop good prosecutors. And a particular shout out to Jackie Kasoulis, who I was fortunate enough to have not just as United States Attorney, but as a trial partner on the Skrelly case, a mentor and a friend. In addition, I want to thank everyone in my general crimes class, including Maggie Lee, Catherine Mirable, Maria Cruz Melendez, and Marcia Henry, and take a moment to remember our chief, Lisa Kramer, who we lost far too soon. Everybody in the business and securities fraud section, including my supervisor and mentor, Winston Pays, and my fellow supervisors, Julia Nestor, Lauren Elbert, Whit Knapp, and David Pitluck. Serving with you all in BSF has truly been the highlight of my time at ED&Y. I want to thank all of my incredible case and trial partners, including Deborah Zwanny, Taryn Merkel, Michael Rabati, Dave Wohl, Dave Gopstein, David Kessler, David James. There are a lot of Davids in my life. Drew Roll and Dylan Stern, and honorary ED&Yers Brent Weibel and Jen Ambuel. The fantastic support staff, victim specialists, and paralegals I have worked with over the years, including Lisa Alper, Corinne Sutton, Lisa Foster, Pat D'Amiglio, and my paralegals turned lawyers, Kaylee Montecalvo and Gabriella Baldwin, and my fellow members of the current front office, along with Breon, Judy Phillips, Carolyn Picorni, Susan Riley, Kristen Mace, Alon Lifshitz, Nicole Bachman, and Joe Maritolo. And finally, and most importantly, I want to thank my husband, Dan, who, as many of you know, is an AUSA in the Southern District of New York. Hiring him proves that sometimes even folks in SDNY get things right. He is my biggest supporter, my best friend, and the epitome of a good prosecutor. And I'm proud of all of his amazing work over the past 12 years. While sometimes having the same job, and right now we have the exact same job, can be a lot, I wouldn't have it any other way. Thank you for the advice, the legal research, for mooting my jury addresses, for holding our lives together when I get sucked into a trial for months at a time, which has happened more than once, and for making sure I always have a steady supply of chocolate and bourbon. Thank you all so much again.
Congratulations, Alex. So now we're going to turn to the Southern District and to the Southern District Civil Division and to JD Barnaya, who told me that his mom is in the audience, and so I'm saying his full French name, but he's actually known as JD. So JD graduated from Brown University in 1998 with honors in biochemistry and a second major in biomedical ethics. He received his JD, magna cum laude, from Cornell Law School in 2002, where he served as a managing editor of the Cornell Law Review. After receiving his law degree, JD completed 3 appellate clerkships. He first clerked for the Honorable Kim McLean Wardlaw of the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit. He then served as a foreign law clerk for Chief Justice Aharon Barak of the Israeli Supreme Court. And finally, he clerked for the Honorable Rina Raji of the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit. Following his clerkships, JD worked as an associate at the Hellerer firm. Not long after he joined the office, which was in June of 2008, JD was asked to join the team representing the government in the Lehman Brothers bankruptcy, the largest in U.S. history and a major component of the 2007-2008 financial crisis. JD led the office's representation of the Internal Revenue Service in resolving its multi-billion-dollar claim against Lehman. He first assisted the IRS in negotiating resolutions of all but one of its many tax disputes with Lehman Brothers. That last tax dispute concerned a complex set of transactions through which Lehman, by invoking an obscure provision of the U.S.-UK tax treaty, claimed nearly $500 million in foreign tax credits for lending U.S. stocks through its British affiliate. JD led a team of 3 AUSAs in successfully defending the IRS's disallowance of these credits at trial in the district court. Lehman appealed to the Second Circuit, but after briefing was completed there, offered to settle by conceding nearly 95% of the credits, the resulting settlement exceeding $480 million. More recently, JD has performed outstanding work representing the government in a high-profile case arising out of the 2017 tax legislation that capped the federal, state, and local tax, SALT deduction, at $10,000. He successfully defended the constitutionality of this provision in a lawsuit brought by New York and other states, both in the district court and at the Second Circuit. In addition to his tax and bankruptcy work, JD has focused much of his practice on significant cases of civil fraud against federal programs. Of particular note is a nationwide False Claims Act case that JD litigated against Allied Home Mortgage, a lender of federally backed mortgages. This matter culminated in a 5-week, 31-witness jury trial in Houston, where the case was transferred from New York, in which the government prevailed on all of its claims and obtained a judgment of nearly $300 million. After the district court entered judgment in the government's favor, JD argued the appeal in the United States Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit, where the court unanimously ruled for the government on all issues. JD has also successfully litigated numerous other fraud matters, many of which involved healthcare providers or financial institutions, resulting in millions of dollars of recoveries. In addition, JD oversaw an important civil rights initiative to identify and combat racial discrimination in mortgage lending. Through this initiative, JD and a colleague filed complaints against 2 mortgage lenders, both of which ultimately settled on very favorable terms. In one of the cases, the investigation found that the interest rates and fees charged by JP Morgan Chase Bank for loans originated through mortgage brokers were significantly higher for approximately 50,000 African American and Hispanic borrowers than they were for similarly situated white borrowers. To resolve the case, Chase agreed to create a $53 million fund to compensate affected borrowers and stipulated to facts acknowledging the discrimination. Most recently, JD played an important role in ensuring that the Metropolitan Correction Center, the federal prison in Lower Manhattan, implemented appropriate safeguards during the COVID-19 epidemic, while leading a team of 3 AUSAs in successfully defending the prison in a proposed class action suit seeking injunctive relief and the appointment of a monitor. JD helped ensure that the MCC implemented improved protocols relating to inmate symptom screening, hygiene, and the provision of medical care. The resulting improvements convinced the district court that no judicial intervention was needed. Finally, JD has served with great distinction in his supervisory roles. In 2017, JD was promoted to become Deputy Chief of the office's Tax and Bankruptcy Unit, and in 2022, to become the co-chief of that unit. Over the past several years, JD has worked on or supervised some of the country's largest and most complex bankruptcies, including Purdue Pharma, Westinghouse Electric Company, Sears, and numerous airlines. He's also worked with the IRS to dramatically increase the office's practice of bringing affirmative injunction cases to shut down the businesses of tax preparers who submit large numbers of fraudulent returns, and to issue summonses to companies and other third parties that facilitate tax evasion. Throughout his tenure, JD has been the consummate AUSA, expertly representing the interests of the United States before a variety of tribunals. Through his work, JD has established valuable legal precedents, brought in hundreds of millions of dollars to the federal treasury, and mentored a generation of civil AUSAs. For all these achievements, JD is a highly deserving recipient of the Henry L. Stimson Medal, and we will join in congratulating him.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me? I'm so pleased to be here with all of you tonight, and especially pleased that we're able to be here in person after several years of Zoom ceremonies. I'd like to start by thanking the Stimson Award Committee for this great honor. I'm also grateful to the committee for recognizing generations of AUSAs, including my fellow honorees tonight, and many past honorees who have gone on to further accomplishments. And thank you, Mark, Susan, and Judge Abrams for your kind remarks. As many of you in the audience know, being an AUSA is exciting and fun. You get to work on some of the most complicated and interesting cases around with friendly and supportive colleagues, and you have the luxury of doing what's right, even if it means not necessarily winning the case. I'm grateful that for the past 13 years, I've been able to do a job I love. Indeed, a job I've been preparing for my whole life. See, my parents who are here tonight will tell you As my parents who are here tonight will tell you, I always wanted to be a lawyer. Back when I was an annoying 8-year-old, I was always debating and arguing about everything. That hasn't changed much. Even now, my husband accuses me of turning every dinner conversation into a deposition. Anyway, one time when I was little, one of my friends said he had seen a neighbor kicking a stray cat. The other kids wanted to throw some toilet paper at his door, a perfectly reasonable 8-year-old response. But I had a better idea. I convinced the other kids that I should write the neighbor a sternly worded letter telling him that he had violated the law against animal cruelty. While I don't know what he did with my letter, I do know that you can trace a direct line from that day to my application to law school. After graduating law school, several excellent clerkships, and a few exciting years as a junior associate at a law firm, where I was only allowed to draft the sternly worded letters, I finally made my way to the U.S. Attorney's Office. In my time at the office, I've learned lots of things, like what to do when the Defense Department accidentally produces a classified document to the ACLU in response to a FOIA request, or how to react when your opposing counsel writes a letter to the judge claiming you violated his First Amendment rights because you work in an office where he has to check his cell phone at the front desk. Or how not to freak out when you realize the flu shot you just received may have been manufactured at a facility you're investigating for serious FDA violations. Don't worry, that was 5 years ago. Plus, as you heard, I've gotten to work on some really cool cases and amazing trials and learned some more serious lessons, like that trials are unpredictable. As you heard a few years ago, I did a 5-week-long jury trial in Houston against a mortgage lender that had defrauded HUD. In what might have been a relatively boring trial, with lots of testimony from underwriters and careful review of correspondence with agency auditors, we ended up with practically soap opera levels of drama. Right off the bat, we had a full Batson hearing after the other side excluded all of the non-white jurors. During the trial, several of the witnesses actually cried during their testimony. And the judge had to dismiss one of the jurors mid-deliberation because he insisted on wearing earplugs and dark glasses and would not talk to the other jurors. Worst of all, we all had to stay in the crappiest hotel in downtown Houston during the trial because all the other hotels were booked for, I'm not making this up, a quilting convention. I've also discovered how our office's work can help people. As you heard, a few years back, we discovered that mortgage brokers working with a big bank had charged tens of thousands of Black and Hispanic borrowers higher interest rates and fees than similarly situated white borrowers. The bank settled the case by agreeing to pay $53 million, and we structured the settlement so that almost all of those millions went back to the overcharged borrowers rather than to the government. It was very meaningful for me to be part of righting such an injustice. Lastly, I've learned that the government doesn't always take the popular position. As you heard, I successfully defended the constitutionality of Congress's 2017 tax law that capped the state and local tax deduction at $10,000, something that probably increased the taxes of almost everywhere in this room. You can stop by and thank me during the cocktail hour. But most importantly, I've had the opportunity to work with and learn from amazing people. I've worked with tremendous AUSAs on team cases and as trial partners, and for a few years had the opportunity to guide junior AUSAs through their first trials as the Office of Senior Litigation Counsel. For the past several years, I've been a supervisor in our tax and bankruptcy unit. I've gotten to work with almost every AUSA in the civil division and see their excellent work. One of the biggest perks of that job has been my wonderful co-chief, Larry Fogelman, who's taught me so much and become a dear friend. I've also served under several great U.S. attorneys, including Damian Williams, who I thank for nominating me for this award. And I've worked under many fantastic civil division chiefs and deputy chiefs over the years. While I can't mention them all, I wanted to specifically note Jeff Ostreicher, who has led this office during very difficult times during the pandemic and before, Neil Corwin, who showed me how to be an AUSA, Sarah Normand, who is a brilliant legal writer and editor, and Jeanette Vargas, who taught me almost everything I know about trials and witnesses. I'm also grateful to have worked with amazing lawyers outside the office. One such person is Judge Rita Raggi, who I had the fortune to clerk for after law school. From her example, I've learned so much about excellence and perfectionism and how powerful it is to be the most knowledgeable person in the room, something that, let's just say, I'm still working on. I'd be remiss if I didn't also thank my family, especially my parents who are here tonight, and my sister for their tremendous love and support for my career and personal life. I've learned so much from their dedication to their own work and their families. And last but not least, my husband Ben and my daughter Hannah, my 2-year-old daughter Hannah, are the reason I get out of bed in the morning. Literally. Hannah wakes up every day at 7 a.m. sharp, even on weekends. I met Ben shortly after I joined the office, and he is the most loving, caring, and supportive spouse anyone could ever ask for. And as for little Hannah, she is the smartest, funniest, most charming little girl I've ever met. And the privilege of being her Abba and seeing her grow up is the most special gift I've ever received. I love you, honey. Again, thank you all for coming, and thank you to the Stimson Committee for this tremendous honor.
Congratulations, JD. And we're going to move on to the Southern District Criminal Division and Perry Carbone. After receiving his undergraduate degree in economics, cum laude, from the State University of New York at New Paltz in 1982, Perry went to Albany Law School, where he was an editor of the Albany Law Review and graduated cum laude in 1986. He then served as a judicial law clerk for the United States Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit. Perry began practice in 1987 as a litigation associate at Weil, Gotshal & Manges. 2 years later, Perry began his prosecutorial career at the Manhattan DA's office, where he distinguished himself by prosecuting organized crime figures in the Rackets Bureau and Labor Racketeering Unit. In 1994, Perry moved to the U.S. Attorney's Office for the District of New Jersey, where over his 9-year tenure, he prosecuted numerous high-profile, complex public corruption cases. By the time he left the District of New Jersey, Perry had risen to the position of Deputy Chief of the Special Prosecutions Division, where he supervised a team of veteran prosecutors. Perry joined the Southern District of New York in 2003. Aside from a brief stint in 2008, where he left to serve as Chief Compliance Officer at GE Capital, Perry has spent nearly 2 decades at the office, mainly prosecuting fraud and public corruption in the highest reaches of New York State and local governments. He has also served as chief of the White Plains office since 2016. Just a few weeks after his arrival at the office, Perry helped in a complex bribery and tax fraud case against former New York State Commissioner of Labor, James McGowan. Within a few months, Perry secured a superseding indictment charging former Commissioner McGowan and his co-defendant with a second and entirely separate scheme. After a 5-week trial, former Commissioner McGowan and his co-defendant were convicted and given lengthy prison sentences. Perry then took the lead in another complex fraud case, this one involving a defendant's sophisticated scheme to steal millions of dollars from 7 computer leasing companies. After a hotly contested 4-week jury trial, the defendant was convicted and sentenced to 65 months imprisonment. The following year, Perry helped to investigate and prosecute the then largest hedge fund-related Ponzi scheme in the office, involving Connecticut-based Bayou hedge funds. Bayou's principals had engineered a $450 million fraud on hedge fund investors. Under Perry's leadership, the firm's top 2 executives pled guilty and were sentenced to 22 and 20 years respectively. Moreover, through in rem civil forfeiture actions, the office recovered more than $110 million in assets. Over the ensuing years, Perry has used his expertise in public corruption cases to help expand the office's prosecution of corrupt officials in the 6 northern counties in the Southern District. These include the 2009 conviction of former New York City Police Commissioner Bernard Kerik for bank fraud, making false statements to White House investigators, and tax-related crimes. Kerik pled guilty in 2009 on the eve of trial to 8 felony counts and, for his crimes, received 4 years in prison. Kerik received a pardon from President Trump in 2020. The 2010 guilty plea from former Senator Vincent Liebel, who was then Putnam County executive-elect for tax evasion and obstruction of justice for his failure to report cash payments received from lawyers seeking favorable official action from Putnam County government and for attempting to silence witnesses during the federal investigation. Perry worked on the 2012 conviction of New York State Senator Nicholas Spano after a painstaking, multi-year financial investigation that resulted in overwhelming evidence that Senator Spano, by making transfers through a series of companies he controlled, had concealed over $150,000 in commissions received from an insurance company that was awarded very lucrative state contracts. And in 2012, Perry worked on the conviction of former Yonkers Councilwoman Sandy Anabi and the Yonkers Republican Party chair on bribery, bank fraud, and tax-related crimes. And after a 4-week trial, Councilwoman Anabi and the party chair were both convicted on all counts and sentenced to 6 and 4 years, respectively. Since 2013, Perry has held supervisory positions in the White Plains office. Even while serving as a supervisor, Perry has continued to handle the investigations and trials of high-profile public corruption cases. In 2014, Perry and his co-counsel investigated and charged a former political consultant, Melvin Lowe, for defrauding the New York Democratic Campaign Committee, and Lowe had also received more than $2.1 million in consulting income from 2007 to 2012, but reported little or no income to the IRS. Lowe was convicted after a 2-week jury trial and sentenced to 3 years. In 2015, Perry was once again called upon to lead the trial team in a high-profile public corruption prosecution. In January 2015, trial began in the bribe case charging former New York State Senate Majority Leader Malcolm Smith and Queens County Republican Party Chair Vincent Tabone. The jury found that Smith, a Democrat, used his position as a state senator to bribe the New York City Republican Party chairman in exchange for their agreement to permit Smith to run for mayor of New York City as a Republican. Both defendants were found guilty of conspiracy, honest services wire fraud, and Travel Act bribery following a month-long jury trial. Smith was also found guilty of Hobbs Act extortion, and Tabone was found guilty of witness tampering. As the chief of the White Plains Division, on top of all of this, Perry has supervised hundreds of matters ranging from sophisticated, large-scale fraud and tax cases, murder cases, gang takedowns, crimes against children, to significant prosecutions of organized crime figures. More broadly, Perry has also been a leader and innovator in anti-violence efforts in the northern counties. He's worked tirelessly to cultivate important relationships with the office's law enforcement partners, particularly with the 6 district attorney's offices. He's, in his spare time, an adjunct professor at Elizabeth Hobbs School of Law at Pace University, where he teaches courses in both criminal procedure and white-collar crime. Both as a frontline AUSA and then as a key member of the office's leadership team, Perry has contributed immeasurably, ensuring that justice is served with fairness, compassion, and good judgment. For his tireless dedication, Perry embodies the highest traditions of the office, and we are so pleased to present him with the Stimson Medal.
Thank you, and good evening. Thank you so much, Susan, for your remarks. Thank you, Mark, the entire Stimson Committee, and the New York City Bar Association for hosting this event and for this incredible honor. Judge Abrams, thank you for your thoughtful remarks. May I say, and for your confession, by the way, but may I say, now that we're doing true confessions, you may have Stimson envy, but I can tell you that many, many AUSAs, like myself, have Abrams envy. You were a role model and the face of the office for a generation of AUSAs. And when I walked out of your office 20 years ago, when you interviewed me, I knew that the Southern District was the place I wanted to be. So this award is very special and it's very humbling, but I think as Henry Stimson would see it, it's really less about any individual public servant, and it's more about a celebration of service to the public. It's an acknowledgement that what we all do as public servants really matters. So in that spirit, I want to congratulate and thank those here who serve the public. To name a few, thanks to Damien and Margaret and our entire executive staff, Neil, for their superb leadership during what has been a very challenging time for law enforcement in general, and our office in particular. I'm also very grateful to the 12, and I think I hold the record, U.S. attorneys that I've had the privilege of serving, along with Robert Morgenthau, AKA the boss of bosses. And thank you, Audrey Strauss, for your leadership throughout the pandemic. To all our friends in the Eastern District, especially the other award recipients, Matt and Alex, and JD from my office, it's an honor to share this evening with you. And to all my dear friends and colleagues in the Southern District, my chosen family, you taught me that public service is a team sport where winning means just doing the right thing all the time. And it's a privilege to share a common passion with you, and I've learned so much from all of you. To my other family, my Italian-American family, you taught me to work hard, to be humble, to pursue my passions, and more importantly, to appreciate and enjoy fine Italian food early and often with your friends and family and the ones you love. To my big brother and sister, who always showed me the way by doing the right thing. And to my wife, Stephanie, who's the very best. When we married, one of our vows was that our wealth would be measured by pursuing our passions in public service. So we agreed to skip the Lexus, drive a Honda, pass on the cruises, and do vacations camping in the Catskills. And to Anna and Joseph, my amazing kids, thank you for pretending that a day hiking beats a trip to Disney World any day, and for your terrific sense of humor. To all the agents I've worked with, they call them special agents for a reason. It really takes a special person to do what they do fairly and justly with unending dedication. And I've had the honor and privilege of working with some of the most special agents on the planet. To all the support staff in White Plains who quietly work behind the scenes providing critical support to the mission of the office, thank you for all that you do. Now I want to just talk for a minute about one of the most rewarding things about public service and the office that I work in. I've mostly prosecuted public corruption cases, as Susan said, but to be clear, all the cases that we do are very, very important. Violent crime, crimes against children, tax crimes, fraud, terrorism. But prosecuting corrupt officials is critically important to the cause of justice, especially now. In White Plains, I and my colleagues have prosecuted 4 former New York State senators, a county executive-elect, corrupt Yonkers councilwoman, among others. Here's why public corruption work is so important. The public's trust in government has never been super high, but rarely has it been lower than it has in recent years. According to this year's annual Pew Research poll, only 2 in 10 Americans trust our government to do what's right all or most of the time. Sadly, some express negative views toward the Justice Department and federal law enforcement. When hardworking career prosecutors and agents try to hold someone accountable for violations of law and they're accused of acting dishonestly or in bad faith, that's just unacceptable and it's unfair. Now, history has shown that prosecuting corrupt officials hasn't succeeded in ending corruption. But even if individual cases don't end corruption, they do something that's even more important. They restore public trust in government by showing that we hold people accountable without regard to wealth, connections, or politics. These cases honor and celebrate all public servants, particularly federal law enforcement. And I'm as proud as can be to work for an office that, to use that often quoted phrase that we've heard tonight, does the right thing for the right reasons without fear of favor. Let me close with a special thanks to the White Plains AUSAs, especially the general crimesters, past and present. I truly cherish the time I spend with you. From the day you arrive in White Plains, I learned so much from each and every one of you. I want to share one small story about an interaction that I have with one of our White Plains general crimesters. Whenever I pass him in the hall, I'd ask him how he's doing that day. And his response is always the same. He grins from ear to ear, and he says, "I'm living the dream." That simple phrase perfectly captures the spirit of our office and the work that we do. Our general crimesters work tireless hours without complaint. They get calls from me sometimes in the middle of the night. They do every kind of case, from mail theft to murders, with passion, kindness, and good judgment. I would thank them for all that they do, but they neither expect nor want any thanks. They, like all of us, get our thanks from the work that we do. So my message to the general crimesters is that Henry Stimson's legacy needs to shine brightly now more than ever. There's anger out there. There's anger about social injustice, anger about politics, and sometimes just disappointment in the overall fairness of our system. But access to justice is not guaranteed. It's you and the decisions that you make every day that ensure that justice is being dispensed fairly and equally. As every general crimester in the Southern District knows, we always close by asking our juries to do three things. So in the finest traditions of the office, I want to ask you to do three things. First, continue to support each other. You're bonded for life. The professional and personal relationships you make now with your fellow AUSAs and the agents you work with will last for a lifetime. Second, continue to always do what's right and speak up when you see something that's not right. That's what makes your job so special. And after you've done those two things, make sure that you go home, sit at the table, and share a bottle of wine and a good meal made from the finest and freshest ingredients with the people that you love the most. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful evening.
So in closing this evening, and first of all, I'd like to ask you to join me in a round of applause for all of our winners. Now, just permit me a few words on behalf of the committee itself. I'd like to echo some of the comments that Susan made earlier, that the committee wants you to note that the standards of excellence and integrity and public service celebrated this evening don't just happen. They require constant attention and effort and often courage. And protecting the rule of law and our fundamental legal institutions and traditions is critical to our American system of government. This is particularly true when these institutions come under attack, as we have witnessed in recent years. As a clear reminder, we must take note of the revelations of the January 6th committee and also of former U.S. Attorney in the Southern District, Jeff Berman's book that came out last week. These two great offices are the jewels of the justice system and must be protected. And speaking to the AUSAs, as echoing what others have said, you're on the front line defending the rule of law. And the mantra to do the right thing should guide your work every day. We trust that you will continue to work to preserve the principles of Henry Stimson and the traditions, including integrity and independence. We want to express our appreciation to the City Bar and its staff for making the ceremony possible. I want to thank all of you for coming and hope you enjoy our celebration next door here as we complete this lovely ceremony this evening. Thank you very much for coming.